the early 19th century, and the Industrial Revolution is at its peak. 10 years have passed since the British consolidated rule over the island of Ceylon by annexing Kandy, and it has been a decade of decadence. A host of British pioneers, as they call themselves, have planted and replanted one cash crop after the other, and the notoriously fertile Ceylonese soil is being worked to the hilt. The British are a very different kind of European than Ceylonese are used to, and their thinly veiled governance of the island soon shows itself for what it really is: an aggressive export-based trade system whose sole purpose is to serve the empire at the expense of the natives. They enlist and enrich many locals into their service, giving them various positions of authority over the rest of their countrymen. But a young Ceylonese boy from the western coast carries a special fire of freedom in his belly. His short life would change the course of Ceylon's history forever. This is the story of Veera Purannappu, the rebel of Matale. The chieftains who signed the Kandy Convention, or the Udarata which annexed the Kingdom of Kandy and consolidated British rule across the island, are feeling undermined. They believe that the carefully forged Treaty of Governance is now being abandoned by the British for capital and profit, and that the many privileges they enjoyed are being taken away. There is no choice but rebellion. What resulted was the poorly organized Overwell Lassa uprising of 1817, which was mercilessly crushed by the British. Many men and women have fallen in the fight, and their homes are destroyed, leaving a scar on the local Ceylonese. The British even capture and behead rebels. On one such beheading, that of the rebel leader Kappetipola Disave, they find he has a rather unusual lack of fear, so they take his skull back to England for research. It was only returned after independence and lies at the Kandy Museum today. On the 7th of November 1812, Veera Hennedige Francisco Fernando is born to Calistro and Helena Fernando, simple businessfolk from the bustling coastal city of Moratuwa. Tales of Kandy chieftains' bravery and their brutal deaths are folklore in the rest of the island, and no one was more inspired than young Francisco. Francisco himself is an excellent student at the Wesleyan School, taking in a sober missionary education as was the tradition for middle-class Ceylonese children of the time, and he lived a fairly ordinary life in Uyana, a predominantly Christian town in Moratuwa. In Ceylon, village headmen were known as Gammuladani. Under the British government, these Gammuladani were trusted British appointees and had been granted expansive powers. They are granted authority to act as local regulators, tax collectors, administrators, and police chiefs all rolled into one. Oftentimes, they are local bigwigs or businessmen who have risen the ranks and see a government post as a way of advancing their own interests. Abuse of power is commonplace, and villagers often feel oppressed by these local overlords. The Gammuladani of Uyana is embroiled in a feud with a local peasant family. One evening, he arrives at the family's thatched roof house, torch in hand, ready to raze it to the ground. A 13-year-old Francisco Fernando is watching from the sidelines as the drama unfolds. Villagers rush to the scene, murmuring to each other in panic as the Gammuladani rails obscenities at the family and touches the flame to the roof. The family shriek in horror. The young boy rushes at the headman, fists raised. The force of his attack throws the Gammuladani to the ground. He demands an apology, which the headman readily gives and extracts a further promise that the family will be left alone. But this is not the victory he thinks it is. The Gammuladani will certainly hound Francisco and his family for his public loss of face, and arrangements are made to send him away from Moratuwa immediately. After a tearful and hurried goodbye, Francisco leaves for Ratnapura, a bustling district in the south-central part of the island, to live with his uncle, Marcellinus Fernando. Marcellinus is the first Sinhalese proctor, or lawyer, to be appointed in Ceylon and is well respected in Ratnapura, and it is here that Francisco will live until early adulthood. Francisco finds employment at a nearby tavern and brewery. He is naturally charming and friendly, mixing well with people, and quickly becomes a favorite among locals and even British soldiers. Francisco is taller than the average Ceylonese man, wears his hair long, and with his hazel eyes, his good looks and friendly manners, is becoming legendary in the area. The locals have trouble pronouncing his name Francisco and instead call him Parasikku. Soon he is granted the title Appu, a customary honorific for the people of Ratnapura and a mark of respect. Over the years, his birth name is further shortened to Purannappu. Purannappu, as he will be known until his death, even speaks English through his friendships with the British soldiers who guard European plantations. But he is always wary of the white men who control his country. He is a natural rebel and a leader, but has not yet found his cause. Meanwhile, to the north, tensions are brewing. The people of Kandy are left in no doubt as to what really interested the British, and that was large-scale, export-oriented commercial agriculture. After the Uva Lassa defeat, the British turned Kandy's extensive land into coffee plantations to support the empire's trade. Under the imperial free trade policy, all trade taxes are slowly being abolished or reduced. To make up for any impact that this might have on their salaries, British civil servants are encouraged to invest in and profit from commercial export agriculture. From 1825 until the 1850s, almost all British officials of the state were also coffee planters. Systematically, the governor of Ceylon, Edward Barnes, and his successors introduced law after law to enable the trade. They started with legalizing forced labor and conducting an extensive land grab. Governor Barnes passes ordinances which allow the colonial state to reintroduce what is essentially pre-colonial forced labor under the Sinhalese monarchy. Ironically, Rajakarya, as it is known, is services rendered by citizens in exchange for land and was usually for the purpose of building roads and other public works. The British had changed this system and introduced an optional tax in its place. But now it was brought back. Under the reinstatement of Rajakarya, native men are conscripted to work on roads for a number of days in the year, in a reminder of their lives under feudal kings. Or they could pay a hefty tax they could not afford to relieve themselves of these duties. The colonial state justifies this simply. They are technically the new king. But more vitally, the British must secure the most important factor of production: land. By 1840, a law is enacted that changes everything. The Crown Lands Encroachment Ordinance No. 12. This law provides for the colonial state to lay claim to all uncultivated and unoccupied land unless the natives were able to prove their title to it, an impossibility at the time. And so, the very first set of plantation lands that were made available to commercial agriculturists were given completely free or cheap. On average, 255 acres were taken each day until Crown lands, as they would come to be known, were almost exclusively used for plantation agriculture. The land rush was so extensive, records show that in a single day, in a single district in the central province, 13,275 acres, over 53 square kilometers, were sold, all for a meager £3,000, and all to state officials. Legal resolution of title disputes is nearly impossible, as some buyers of Crown lands are later even appointed local judges. Free or cheap land, cheap imported labor from India, roads built for free by the natives, and generous tax exemptions are a bonanza to the British, who scramble to get a piece of the pie. By 1845, even the Colonial Office in London admits that the British civil servants of Ceylon are neglecting their official duties and are getting too distracted by their side businesses in the coffee and cinnamon trade and are ordered to sell their estates. So lucrative was the trade to government officials that the governor pleads for them to be allowed to own lands as long as they are not directly involved in managing them. Like a moth to a flame, Purannappu is drawn to Kandy. He has admired Kandians ever since hearing tales of the 1817 rebellion and their prowess in holding out against repeated invasions, and now he sees their plight. On one of his visits, Purannappu gets an audience with the Arachi of Gunnapana, a local chief with no connections to the government. The Arachi admires Purannappu for his boldness and daring, but Purannappu is too busy being love-struck at first sight with the Arachi's daughter, Bandaramanika. From then on, Purannappu invents excuses to visit Gunnapana to court Bandaramanika. They meet in secret, wary of their differences in caste, an ideology that was especially strong at the time in Kandy. Meanwhile, Governor Edward Barnes, who has terraformed Kandy into a coffee plantation, steps down in 1847 to be succeeded by Count Torrington. Count Torrington is appointed governor despite having no knowledge of the colony, and in a demonstration of his influence with the royal family, he has even beaten out Emerson Tennant, an educated statesman with extensive knowledge and study of Ceylon. Tennant is offered the position of colonial secretary to oversee administration of the island. The nation's finances are in disarray, and together they are bent on bringing the ship back on course. Torrington will also become the object of Puranapu's fierce determination. Thank you for watching, and a special thanks to our Patreon members for their continued support. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell button to get notified of new episodes.